My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 38 years old, and I learned that a gift can look beautiful from the outside and still carry something cruel enough to split a family open forever. That afternoon, my daughter came home much earlier than she was supposed to. I heard the front door open, then a tiny sound from the hallway. Not a scream. Not even a full sob. Just that broken kind of breathing a child makes when she is trying so hard not to fall apart. When I turned around, she was standing there with her winter coat still zipped up, her eyes swollen from crying, and a silver-wrapped box pressed against her chest. She did not run to me first. She held the box out like it was too heavy for her small hands, even though it was barely bigger than a shoebox. I asked what happened, but she only shook her head and whispered that they told her to give it to me and not let me overreact. That was the moment my stomach went cold. My parents had judged my marriage, my job, my home, and almost every choice I had ever made. But using my child as a messenger was something different. I sat her on the couch, checked her face, her arms, her hands, and promised her she was safe. Then I opened the box. At first, I could not understand what I was seeing. Then I saw the torn pieces, the red marks, the note folded underneath, and something hidden inside that should never have been anywhere near a child. I reached for my phone before I even called my husband. By the time my best friend arrived, an officer was already stepping into my living room. And just when I thought the worst part had already been discovered, my husband came home, froze at the doorway, and stared at the person standing beside me. His face went pale as he said, "What is he doing here?" Before I tell you what was inside that box, and why that one sentence changed everything, tell me what the weather is like where you are today. Is it calm, or does it feel like a storm is coming too? Stay with me until the end, because this is the story of the day I stopped trying to keep peace with people who were willing to scare my child just to control me. To understand why I did not treat that box like a simple family misunderstanding, you need to understand the kind of house I came from. From the outside, my childhood looked perfectly normal. We had a clean home in a quiet neighborhood outside Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Family photos on the hallway wall, pressed clothes for Sunday mornings, and parents who knew exactly how to smile when other people were watching. My father, Richard Hale, had been a deputy sheriff for more than 25 years, and he carried that voice home with him every night. He did not ask questions. He gave orders. My mother, Evelyn Hale, worked as an elementary school office administrator before she retired, and she had a gift for making every cruel thing sound practical. If my father raised his voice, she would say he was just concerned. If he insulted me, she would say I was taking it the wrong way. If I cried, she would remind me that some daughters had it much worse. I grew up learning that peace in our house meant silence from me. When I became an adult, I thought distance would fix everything. I built a life they did not choose for me, and that alone felt like betrayal to them. I became a pediatric speech therapist because I wanted to help children find their voices again. Children who froze when adults spoke too sharply. Children who struggled to say what they needed. Children who had feelings bigger than the words they knew how to use. My father said it was not a serious career. He wanted me to go into law, marry someone with status, and stay close enough for him to keep one hand on every major decision I made. When I married Daniel, my father acted like I had thrown my future away. Daniel was not flashy. He was not rich. He was not the kind of man my parents could brag about at dinner. He was steady, kind, and patient, which were exactly the things I had spent my whole life needing. My parents hated that they could not intimidate him easily. After our daughter Sophie was born, their control shifted from me to her. Suddenly, every visit came with comments. Her school was too ordinary. Her clothes were too casual. Her bedtime was too relaxed. Her drawing classes were a waste of time. My mother would smile at Sophie and say sweet things, then pull me aside and whisper that I was raising her to be fragile. My father liked to say, "A child needs structure." But what he really meant was obedience. By the time Sophie was 10, I had reduced contact with them as much as I could without starting a war. They could see her on holidays. Sometimes on birthdays. Always with me or Daniel nearby. They were never allowed to take her overnight. They were never allowed to pick her up from school. And they were never allowed to discipline her. For a while, that arrangement worked, mostly because my parents still cared about looking like good grandparents. Then Daniel received a job offer in Portland. It was the kind of opportunity families hope for. Better pay. Better schedule. A safer neighborhood near good schools. and a chance for Sophie to grow up somewhere new without my parents hovering over every part of our lives. We told my parents at a Sunday dinner, thinking they would be disappointed but polite. My mother went quiet. My father put down his fork and stared at Daniel like he had committed a crime. Then he looked at me and said, "You do not get to take my granddaughter away just because your husband got lucky." I remember Sophie freezing in her chair. I remember Daniel reaching under the table for my hand. And I remember realizing that my father had not said our daughter. He had not even said your daughter. He said my granddaughter. Like Sophie was something he owned. I should have known then that the move would bring out the worst in them. But some part of me still wanted to believe that even my parents had limits. I was wrong. A week after that dinner, my parents changed so quickly it almost felt rehearsed. My mother started texting me every morning with little heart emojis and messages about how much she missed Sophie. My father, who almost never apologized for anything, left a voicemail saying he had spoken too harshly and did not want Sophie to remember him as an angry old man. The words sounded good. But something about them made my skin crawl. My father did not sound sorry. He sounded like someone testing a new strategy. Still, Sophie was only 10, and she loved the idea of having grandparents who wanted her. She did not know the history the way I did. She did not know how many nights I had cried into my pillow as a teenager while my mother stood outside the door telling me to stop embarrassing the family. Sophie only knew that her grandmother had sent her a new set of colored pencils, and her grandfather had asked to see her latest drawings over video call. For 2 weeks, they behaved perfectly. They asked polite questions. They praised Sophie's art. They told Daniel that Portland sounded exciting. My mother even said she was proud of me for building a life that gave Sophie more choices. That one almost convinced me, because it was exactly the sentence I had wanted to hear my entire life. I told my best friend Megan Ellis about it over coffee during my lunch break. Megan had known me since college, back when I still believed I could earn my parents' approval by being perfect. Now she worked as a paralegal at a family law office, and she had the calm, careful way of speaking that came from watching too many families destroy each other through control disguised as love. When I told her my parents suddenly wanted a farewell brunch for Sophie before we moved, she did not tell me what to do. She just asked, "What boundaries are in writing?" That question stayed with me. So I wrote everything clearly. Sophie would visit for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon. My mother would pick her up and bring her home. Sophie would keep her phone in her coat pocket. No surprise stops. No other adults I did not know about. No conversations about court, custody, or trying to convince Sophie not to move. My mother agreed to every condition in a text message. My father sent a thumbs up emoji, which was so unlike him that Daniel read it twice and said, "I do not like this." I did not like it either. But Sophie was excited. She spent Saturday night drawing a picture of our future house in Portland. In the picture, Daniel was holding a toolbox. I was holding a coffee mug. And Sophie was standing between us with a huge smile and green trees behind her. She said she wanted to show Grandma and Grandpa that moving did not mean forgetting them. That sentence nearly broke my heart. Children can be so generous to people who have not earned it. On Sunday, my mother arrived exactly on time. She hugged Sophie too tightly, complimented her hair, and told me not to worry because they only wanted one peaceful afternoon. My father stayed in the car. I watched from the porch as Sophie climbed into the back seat with her drawing folder on her lap. Before the car pulled away, she turned and waved at me through the window. I waved back, trying to ignore the heavy feeling in my chest. Daniel had gone into the office to finish paperwork for the Portland transfer, so I was home alone. I kept my phone beside me while I folded laundry and answered emails. At first, my mother sent one photo of Sophie sitting at their kitchen table with a plate of pancakes. Sophie looked a little stiff, but she was smiling. I replied, "Looks fun. Please remind her to text me if she wants to." My mother responded, "She is fine." 20 minutes later, I asked how it was going. My mother wrote, "We are just talking." That was when I stood up from my desk. Just talking could mean anything in my family. I called Sophie, but the call went to voicemail. I was reaching for my keys when the doorbell rang. It had been less than an hour since Sophie left. When I opened the door, she was standing there alone, crying, with a silver box in her hands. For 1 second, I could not move. My brain noticed the details before it understood the danger. Sophie's coat was zipped crooked. One of her boots was untied. Her drawing folder was gone. Her cheeks were wet. And she was holding that box so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Behind her, my mother's car was already disappearing down the street. She had not walked Sophie to the door. She had not called me. She had dropped my crying child on my porch and driven away. I pulled Sophie inside and locked the door. She stood in the entryway like she was afraid to step any farther, and that scared me more than the tears. Sophie was a sensitive child, but she was not dramatic. She did not cry for attention. If she was shaking like that, someone had made her feel unsafe. I knelt in front of her and kept my voice soft. I asked if anyone had touched her, if she was hurt, if she needed a doctor. She shook her head no. But her eyes kept going back to the box. Finally, she pushed it toward me and whispered, "They said this was for you. They said not to open it until I got home." I asked, "Who said that?" She swallowed hard and said, "Grandpa." Then she added, "Grandma said you might get upset because you do not like hearing the truth." I felt something inside me go very still. I took the box and set it on the table by the couch, but Sophie grabbed my sleeve before I could open it. She said, "Mom, they were talking about me like I was not there." I sat beside her, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and told her she could tell me slowly. She said the brunch started normally. Pancakes. Orange juice. Questions about Portland. Then my father asked if she really wanted to move, or if Daniel and I had made her say that. Sophie told him she wanted to be wherever her parents were. My father did not yell, which somehow made it worse. He leaned close and told her sometimes children do not understand when their parents are making selfish choices. My mother told Sophie that staying near family was more important than following a job. Sophie said she tried to change the subject by showing them the picture she had drawn of our new house. That was when my father stopped smiling. He asked why she had drawn trees instead of grandparents. Sophie told him because the picture was about Portland. My mother took the drawing folder from her and told her she was too young to understand how much she was hurting people. Then my father left the room with the folder. Sophie said she heard paper tearing from the hallway. When he came back, he was holding the silver box. My mother had already put Sophie's coat on her. My father placed the box in Sophie's hands and said, "Give this to your mother. Tell her not to overreact. Tell her this is what happens when people forget where they belong." Sophie began crying in the car, but my mother did not comfort her. She only said, "Your mother needs a wake-up call." Then she dropped Sophie at the curb and drove away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call my mother and demand answers. But Sophie was looking at me like my reaction would decide whether she was safe. So I did the hardest thing a mother can do when her child has been hurt. I stayed calm. I told Sophie she had done nothing wrong. I told her adults should never use children to deliver scary messages. I told her the box could wait until she felt ready. She nodded, but she kept staring at it. Then she said, "I think there is something bad inside." I texted Megan with one hand. "Please come now. Something happened with my parents." Then I moved the box to the kitchen counter away from Sophie and took a slow breath. The wrapping was neat, almost elegant. Silver paper with a white ribbon. That made it feel even more disturbing. Cruelty should not come dressed like a present. I untied the ribbon first. Sophie buried her face in the blanket. I peeled back the paper. Inside was a white cardboard box. On top sat a folded note with my name written in my father's blocky handwriting. Under the note, I saw torn paper, red marker streaks, and the corner of Sophie's drawing. Then I heard a faint beep from inside the box. Soft. Steady. Wrong. I told Sophie to stay on the couch and not touch anything. My voice sounded calm, but my hands were shaking so badly I had to put the box down. I took photos before moving the contents because somewhere deep inside me, a practical part of my brain knew this was evidence. The first thing I lifted out was Sophie's drawing, or what was left of it. My father had torn it into strips, then placed the pieces back in the box like a puzzle he wanted me to suffer through. The part with Daniel's face was ripped away. The part with me had red marker across the mouth. Sophie's little drawn body had been cut out completely and placed at the bottom, separate from us. I had seen controlling behavior my whole life. But seeing it aimed at my child made my chest burn. Under the paper was Sophie's stuffed fox, the one she had accidentally left at my parents' house 3 months earlier. She had asked about it twice, and my mother said she could not find it. Now it was in the box, opened along the seam and stitched back together with thick black thread. Red marker had been scribbled around the stitching to make it look frightening. I heard Sophie make a tiny sound behind me, and I turned the box so she could not see. That was when the beeping came again. I held the stuffed fox closer, pressed gently along the seam, and felt something hard inside. Megan arrived as I was using kitchen scissors to open the ugly stitches. She took one look at my face and closed the door behind her without asking questions. I pulled out a small black device no bigger than a car key. Megan stared at it and said, "Laura, that looks like a tracker." For a moment, the room tilted. A destroyed drawing was cruel. A threatening note was cruel. But a tracking device hidden inside my daughter's toy was something else. That meant planning. That meant they wanted access to her location. That meant they were not just angry about the move. They were preparing to interfere. Megan told me to put it down and photograph everything. Then we found the rest. At the bottom of the box were 3 printed photos. Sophie walking through the school gate. Sophie outside her Saturday art class. Sophie standing beside Daniel's truck in the grocery store parking lot. None of those pictures had been posted online. None of them had been taken by us. Someone had followed my child. My ears started ringing, but I forced myself to unfold the note. It said, "Do not overreact. Sophie belongs close to family. If you force this move, people will learn what kind of mother takes a child away from everyone who loves her. We have enough to prove you are unstable. Think carefully." I read it twice because my mind refused to accept that my own parents had put those words in a box and made my daughter carry it home. Megan quietly took Sophie into the next room and gave her headphones and a cartoon on low volume. Then she came back and said, "Call the police. Not your mother. Not Daniel first. Police." I called the non-emergency line because no one was breaking into the house at that moment. But I told them there was a threat involving a child, possible stalking, and a tracking device hidden in a toy. Saying those words out loud made me feel like I was describing someone else's life. The dispatcher told me an officer would come by. While we waited, Megan helped me place everything on clean paper bags instead of plastic because she said it was better for preserving items if anyone needed to examine them. She was not acting like my lawyer. She was acting like the only person in the room who could think clearly while my world cracked open. Sophie asked once if she was in trouble. I went to her immediately, knelt down, and told her no. I told her the adults who scared her were the ones who had done something wrong. She whispered, "Grandpa said you would be mad at me if I cried." That sentence hurt worse than the note. I told her crying was her body telling the truth. When Officer Nathan Cole arrived, he did not dismiss me the way I had feared. He asked to see the box, the note, the photos, and the device. His expression changed when he saw the pictures of Sophie at school. He asked Sophie a few gentle questions with me beside her. She told him about the brunch, the torn drawing, and my father saying her mother only listened when she was scared. Officer Cole wrote that down slowly. Then came the knock at the door. It was not soft. It was 3 hard hits, like the person outside believed the door still belonged to him. I looked through the peephole and saw my father on the porch. His jaw was tight. His eyes were cold. Before I could speak, he called through the door. "Laura, I know you called the police. Open up before you embarrass this family more than you already have." Officer Cole stepped forward and told me to open the door only if I felt safe. Megan took Sophie down the hall. I opened it with the chain still on. My father looked past me, saw the officer, and smiled like this was all beneath him. He said he had come to explain a family matter. Officer Cole told him to step back. My father did not. He said, "I am her father. I have a right to be here." That was the exact moment Daniel's truck pulled into the driveway. Daniel came through the door, still wearing his work jacket, holding his keys in one hand and his phone in the other. I had only managed to text him 3 words before he left the office. "Come home now." He expected to find me upset. He expected maybe a fight with my parents. He did not expect to find a police officer in our living room, Megan standing near the hallway like a guard dog, and my father inside our house with that same smug expression he wore whenever he thought he had already won. Daniel stopped so suddenly the door nearly hit his shoulder. His face went pale. Not angry at first. Just pale. Then he looked at me and said, "What is he doing here?" The way he said it made every hair on my arms rise. I asked him what he meant. My father's expression changed for half a second, just long enough for me to know there was something I did not know. Daniel looked from my father to the officer, then back to me. He said, "Laura. He came to my job this morning." The room went quiet. Even my father stopped pretending to smile. Daniel told us that my father had waited for him in the parking lot outside his office. He had not shouted. He had not threatened him in a way that sounded obvious. That was never my father's style when witnesses might be nearby. Instead, he told Daniel that moving Sophie to Portland would be a mistake, that courts cared about stability, and that a man with Daniel's past should be careful before dragging a child across state lines. My stomach dropped. Years earlier, Daniel had gone through anxiety after a serious job site accident. He had gotten help, recovered, and built a strong life. My father knew that because my mother had overheard me mention it once during a private conversation. Now, he was twisting it into a weapon. Daniel said my father told him, "I know more than you think. I know her school schedule. I know Laura leaves early on Thursdays. I know you cannot watch them every second. If you push this move, I will make sure the right people ask the right questions." Daniel had not told me because he thought my father was just trying to scare him. He planned to tell me that night after Sophie was asleep. But now the box was open on our table, and the threat was no longer hidden behind careful words. Officer Cole asked Daniel to repeat everything slowly. My father interrupted, saying this was ridiculous, that Daniel was exaggerating, that everyone was turning love into a crime. Then Officer Cole asked him about the tracking device. My father said it was for safety. He said the world was dangerous. Sophie was young. And if her parents were determined to make reckless choices, someone responsible had to think ahead. I asked him why he put it inside a stuffed animal and sent it home with torn drawings and a threatening note. He pointed at me and said, "Because you do not listen unless someone shocks you into listening." My mother arrived 10 minutes later, breathless and crying before she even reached the door. She looked at the officer, then the box, then me, and for once she seemed genuinely frightened. But not frightened for Sophie. Frightened of consequences. She started saying they never meant to hurt anyone. She said the photos were just to show they were involved. She said the note sounded worse than they intended. Then she made the mistake that changed everything. She said, "We only wanted to scare you enough to think clearly." Megan closed her eyes like she could not believe my mother had said it out loud. Officer Cole wrote it down. I looked at my mother and asked, "You wanted to scare me by scaring my child?" She cried harder. But she did not deny it. My father told her to stop talking. That was when the old pattern appeared in front of everyone. He ordered. She folded. I used to be part of that pattern too. But not anymore. Officer Cole told my parents they needed to leave the property and that any further contact could make the situation worse for them. My father tried to argue that he knew the law. Officer Cole calmly said, "Then you should understand why this is serious." After they left, I called Sophie's school and removed both of my parents from every emergency contact list. Daniel changed the locks that night, even though my parents did not have keys. Megan helped me save screenshots, voicemails, emails, and photos in one folder. The next morning, my father sent a long email to several relatives claiming I was unstable, Daniel was controlling, and Sophie was being isolated from her loving grandparents. But he did not know our doorbell camera had recorded him on the porch telling me to open the door before I embarrassed the family. He did not know Officer Cole had heard him call it a family matter while standing in front of a box full of evidence. And he did not know Sophie had told Megan something else after we thought she was asleep. She said Grandpa told her if she stayed quiet, he could help her stay in Cedar Rapids. That sentence ended any last hesitation I had. 2 days later, there was a family meeting at my aunt's house. Not because I wanted peace, but because my parents had already started spreading lies, and I wanted the truth spoken once, clearly, with witnesses. My father arrived confident. My mother arrived looking small. Daniel sat beside me. Megan came too. Not as a lawyer, but as the person who had seen the box before anyone could claim I made it up. My father started with a speech about family rights. I let him talk. Then Daniel played the doorbell recording. After that, Megan placed printed photos of the box, the note, and the tracker on the table. Nobody defended my father. Not one person. My father's face turned red. He slammed his hand down and shouted, "She is my granddaughter." I stood up, looked him in the eye, and said, "No. She is my child. And you will never use her to control me again." That meeting was the last time my father ever stood in the same room as Sophie. The next morning, Daniel and I filed for a temporary protective order with the help of a local attorney Megan recommended. We brought everything. The note. The photographs. The tracking device. The doorbell recording. Screenshots of my father's emails. The written statement from Officer Cole. Daniel's statement about the parking lot threat. And most painfully, my daughter's own account of what happened at the brunch. I hated that Sophie's words had to become part of a file. But I reminded myself that protecting a child sometimes means documenting the truth, even when the truth hurts to read. The court granted temporary restrictions while the case was reviewed. My parents were not allowed to contact Sophie, come to our home, approach her school, or send gifts through relatives. I expected my mother to beg. I expected my father to rage. What I did not expect was how quickly their perfect image began to fall apart. My father had spent years being the respectable retired deputy. The man neighbors trusted. The man other parents greeted at school events. The man who knew how to sound calm while making other people feel small. But people look at you differently when they learn you hid a tracker in a child's toy. Sophie's school was notified immediately. Her principal was kind but firm. My parents were removed from every pickup list, every event list, every emergency form. A staff member recognized my father's car from the photos and admitted he had seen it parked near the school more than once, even though my father had no reason to be there. That detail went into the file too. My father tried to save himself by saying he had only been watching out for his granddaughter. But when concern looks like surveillance, it is not love. It is control. My mother tried a different approach. She sent messages through relatives saying she missed Sophie, saying she had been pressured, saying she never meant for the box to be so frightening. For a few hours, that almost worked on me. Not because I believed her, but because daughters carry hope longer than they should. Then I remembered Sophie standing in our entryway with shaking hands. I remembered my mother driving away without checking whether her granddaughter could even breathe through her tears. So when one relative told me my mother was heartbroken, I said, she handed my child the box. That ended the conversation. My father made one final mistake 3 weeks before our move. He showed up at Sophie's school with a bouquet of flowers and a stuffed bear, telling the front office he only wanted to say goodbye. Because the school had been warned, they did not let him pass the office. They called me, then called the police. He left before officers arrived, but the incident strengthened our case and destroyed the last of his excuses. After that, even relatives who had tried to stay neutral stopped asking me to forgive him. My mother moved into my aunt's spare room for a while, claiming she needed space from my father. I do not know whether that was real guilt or just another attempt to avoid consequences. I only know that I did not let her see Sophie. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will not be purchased with tears. It will not be rushed because other people feel uncomfortable. And it will never require my child to stand in front of the people who scared her just so adults can pretend the family is whole. We moved to Portland in early spring. The first few weeks were hard. Sophie jumped whenever the doorbell rang. She refused to sleep with stuffed animals in her room. She asked me more than once if Grandpa could find us. Every time, I told her the truth in a way a child could hold. I said, the adults are handling it. You are safe. You did the right thing by telling me. We found her a therapist who worked with children, and slowly, piece by piece, Sophie came back to herself. Daniel helped her build a little art desk by the window of her new bedroom. I bought her a fresh sketchbook, but I did not ask her to draw our family again. That had to be her choice. One evening, about 2 months after the move, I found her sitting at the desk with colored pencils spread everywhere. She had drawn a house with tall trees behind it, brighter than the first picture, bigger too. Daniel was in the yard holding a hammer. I was on the porch with a mug of coffee. Sophie was standing between us with one hand on the front door. Above the door, she had written, "Only safe people can come in." I cried quietly in the hallway. Not because the picture was sad, but because it was honest. That was the lesson my parents never understood. Family is not a title you get to use as a weapon. Love does not threaten. Love does not track. Love does not scare or manipulate. Real love makes children feel safe enough to tell the truth. And real parenting means choosing your child's peace over your own fear of conflict. What happened to us taught me that education is not only what children learn in school. It is also the valuable knowledge they learn from watching adults set boundaries, tell the truth, and protect the vulnerable. Sophie learned that day that her voice mattered. I learned that keeping peace with harmful people can cost a child their sense of safety. And Daniel learned that silence, even when meant to protect someone, can leave danger in the dark too long. We are not a perfect family. But we are a safer one now. My parents wanted to use fear to keep us close. Instead, fear showed me exactly how far away we needed to go. And if anyone listening has ever been told that setting boundaries makes you cruel, remember this. Boundaries do not destroy healthy families. They reveal which relationships were depending on your silence to survive. Our team works hard to create revenge stories that carry emotion, conflict, and a message viewers can truly think about after the video ends. This story is completely fictional and was written only to share lessons through an entertaining narrative. We hope it encourages viewers to value themselves, protect their peace, and never let toxic people define their worth.